Good morning, everyone. Today is June 4th, 2020. The time is 9:30, and I am going to call the Selma City Council special meeting to order, located at 1710 Tucker Street, Selma, California, and also participating via teleconference phone number 1-786-635-1003, ID number 860-2360-8786, password 2020. And as usual, because of COVID, we have to read our notice to the public disclaimer. And so with that, we will I'll give a brief statement, then we'll continue on. On March 4th, 2020, Governor Newsom proclaimed a state of emergency in California as a result of the threat of COVID-19. On March 17, 2020, Governor Newsom issued Executive Order N-2920, which allows a local legislative body to hold public meetings via teleconferencing and to make public meetings accessible telephonically or otherwise electronically to all members of the public seeking to observe and address the local legislative body. Pursuant to Executive Order N-2920, please be advised that some or all of Selma City Councils will participate in the meetings via teleconference. Public participation pursuant to Executive Order N-2920, and given the current health concerns, members of the public can access meetings streamed live online on our YouTube page. Members of the public may not attend the meeting in person. In lieu of attendance at the meeting, the public can provide public comments verbally for the City's Council's consideration by calling in on the number posted on our agenda. Staff will unmute the public during the public comment portion of the meeting. Alternatively, the public can send correspondence to the City Council regarding items by emailing publiccomment@cityofselma.com by 8:30 a.m. of the day of the meeting, with the subject line Selma City Council meeting correspondent agenda item, reference to the agenda item you wish to make the comment, or in the subject line City of Selma non-agenda item. All correspondence that does not relate to a specific item on the agenda will be made part of the official record of this meeting and will be referred to the city manager or other staff for any appropriate actions or attention. Correspondence that does relate to a specific item on the agenda will be addressed as appropriate during consideration of that agenda item to which it relates. Contact the city clerk with any questions by phoning City Hall at 559-891-2200 extension 3104, or by using the email referenced above, which is publiccomment@cityofselma.com. Okay. With that, we will move into a roll call, please.
Councilmember Avalos?
Here.
Councilmember Robertson?
Here.
Councilmember Trujillo?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Guerra?
Here.
Mayor Franco?
Here. Potential conflict of interest. Any council member who has a potential conflict of interest may now identify the item and recuse themselves from discussing and voting on the matter. Okay. Seeing that there's none, we will move on to oral communications. Notice to the public, at this time, any member of the public may address City Council regarding any item which the council has jurisdiction. No actions or discussion will be taken on any item not on the agenda. Issue raised will be referred to the city manager for review. Members of the public shall limit their remarks to 3 minutes. So, I believe you said we have some callers in?
We do. We have 2 callers on the line. Okay, I will start with... Hi, caller. Please state your name for the record, and please note that you do have 3 minutes.
Hi, good morning. Mark Armenta, Unit Director for the Selma Boys and Girls Club.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor, City Council members. We come today with a request, again, unfortunately, due to COVID-19, we did have some fundraisers in place. What can I say? I'm very passionate about the club, very passionate about being in Selma. I just ask that we get this opportunity to continue growing and mentoring children in Selma. Kids are anxious. They want to come back to the club. what can I say? I just ask for this opportunity for us to grow again another year. April 29th, we did celebrate our 4th year being in Selma. So seeing it grow over the 4 years and seeing children grow with me is a special thing to my heart. I just ask for that opportunity again. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mark. Next caller, please.
Good morning, caller. Please state your name for the record and know that you have 3 minutes to speak.
Okay, thank you. This is Diane Carbray. I'm with the Boys and Girls Club. I'm in Fresno. I didn't know Mark was going to be on the phone, so I'll keep it very brief. But last year, the council was able to provide us with funding to keep the club going, and this is now 4 years. The council also asked us to try to find additional funding, and as Mark said, we did do put the committee together, and we had people from Les Schwab, the Waste Management, Cal Water, Chamber of Commerce, all on our committee, and had an event scheduled, which unfortunately did get canceled. And we had 4 staff working with them on that. So we want to continue to do another event in the upcoming year as soon as we can. We also applied for grant funds and got $4,500 from Bank of America to help support the club. So our request is substantially less this year, and we hope to keep it down in the future years, but we are at a shortfall, and we really would appreciate the council approving this expenditure to keep the club going in a part of town that really needs it the most. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any, but I certainly appreciate the generosity. And it's more of an investment than it is generosity, in my opinion, because it's really investing in the future of the kids. And we've also enjoyed the help from the Selma Healthcare District, and so we're asking to help us balance our budget with after we've already gotten the additional funding. So thank you very much, and if you have any questions, let me know, please.
All right. Thank you for your comments. All right. All right. With that, are there any emails?
There's no email.
Okay. Okay, with that, we'll move on to our council city budget session. But before we start, I just want to say hello, everybody, and good morning. And thanks, staff, for being here and working under these circumstances. So I didn't have a chance to say hi to you this morning. I was running a little late, but I just wanted to share that. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, City Manager Gallivan.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. I too, good morning, and thank you for being here so we can continue our work on the budget. This is our second budget workshop, and it was our honor to present the proposed and balanced 2020-21 fiscal year budget at the last workshop, and we're looking forward to discussion on that with you today. So our goal would be to get the feedback from you today as we go through it, that we could bring a final budget perhaps to you at the meeting on the 15th for adoption. So those are kind of our hopes that we can get that feedback and work through it today. A couple housekeeping items. As mentioned, we do have public call-ins for public participation and are live streaming the video. Public feedback is very important in the budget process, so any members of the public or staff or council members that want to discuss the budget further after this workshop, if there are more questions, we are here to do so. So that feedback is very important to us, and we are here for questions. This is an informal workshop, and this one is really more about the discussion and dialogue we want to have with you about the proposed budget. Furthermore, lunch is being provided, so we do have that later today as well. Thank you, City Clerk, for arranging for lunch. And there are refreshments if you want to get up and get something to sustain your energy through this discussion. We also have on the agenda discussion of council priorities and goals. If you want, we can either do those separately, or we can, I think we will be discussing those as we walk through the budget process and dialogue with you about any questions you have. So if you want, we can kind of merge the two discussions, or if it's council's pleasure, we can do them separately. We're prepared to do either. I know it kind of makes for a very long meeting if we do them separately, so I want to be respectful of everybody's time and the direction that you'd like to do it.
Let me get a quick poll of the council. You guys want to do them all together in one big thing, or do you want to separate them?
I mean, I think they all kind of go together.
They really do.
You know, I mean, we allocating the money according to our goals. If we don't fully go through the goals, maybe we could bring it up as separately at the end, but the two go together.
What do you say, Jim? Any thoughts? All right, well,
See how it goes?
yeah, I'm sorry, I took off my mic. We'll try to do it all together, but if it becomes too cumbersome stuff, then maybe we'll have to, for the sake of time, separate them out.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you. Also, as we discussed at the last meeting, this budget, clearly the impacts of COVID-19 on this year's budget and next year's budget have led to significant decreases in city revenue. And we were looking at a $1.1 million budget gap that has been addressed in this proposed budget. And again, I want to commend staff, department heads, managers, and staff that came together and found ways to make significant reductions in expenses while maintaining current service levels, which means maintaining staffing levels. So it really was our priority to maintain those service levels, those staffing levels, to not have furloughs, to not have layoffs, and to keep our commitments to city staff through our MOU agreements. So those commitments remain, and that all has to do with service levels. Also, I just want to touch on, in addition to those choices and those reductions and strategically trying to do those to maintain service levels, we also propose a budget that does not use any reserves and feel that that is a very important component of this process. We anticipate and advisors have said that this is not going to go away in a year. We certainly hope to rebound sooner than any recession that we've been through in the past. But we need to keep an eye on the fact that this could be a couple-year horizon. And so keeping reserves for perhaps another rainy day is a very important part of getting through this downturn. Also, we have looked at council priorities and again tried to keep those service levels where they have been and continue to work on the goals and the priorities of council. So, and we have held some positions unfilled with the objective of balancing the budget, but have made some changes so that we can continue to keep those service levels. So in short, we have this proposed balanced budget of $14.6 million in the general fund that we think enables the city to maintain service levels and weather this storm called COVID and emerge stronger. We kept in some strategic things to look for funding and to continue our service levels. So with that, I will turn it over to Isaac to review some of the changes since our last meeting. There's been just I think a few cleanup things, and the addition in your book, the additions are the narratives for each department, which shows accomplishments and goals, as well as org charts. So those are our new items in your packet, very similar format to last year's when they were first introduced, but just updated, of course, for the current year and our proposed year ahead. With that, Isaac?
Thank you. Again, welcome, mayors, council members. We'll go through the packet. We won't go to it as in depth as we did last time. Last time was really to go department by department, give you some overview as far as changes, staffing levels, things of that nature. We can go to as much detail as you'd like or as little detail as you like going through this process. I'll kind of again go over some brief overviews. You are seeing an adjustment from the prior year of a balanced budget for prior year for 1920 at $16 million. We are proposing a balanced budget again for this fiscal year, again, with staff's help, going through this process with the understanding we are taking some large overall adjustments due to COVID and the market, of a decrease of about 1.4 overall. Some of that decrease is actually coming within this fiscal year, as you're aware. A large impact is going to be at sales tax with a drop of about 17%, which is a cumulative percentage from this year and going into next year as well. So again, that's one of the largest impacts we'll see for this fiscal. But again, we do have a balanced budget as normal for when going through the budget process. We'll continue to assess and analyze and go through these numbers and make sure we can clean up as much as possible. So when you have a balanced budget, or an adopted budget, I should say, that we're confident in the information and the numbers that are proposing. So we had a slight adjustment. It's really just going through labor and cleaning some of the things up, making sure everybody's on the appropriate steps. Insurance is accounted for. So you have an adjustment only about $20,000. Again, that's really just a cleanup number per se. So that's the overall for the general fund. There are some adjustments that we've come to in the ambulance fund that they will go through. Really, the biggest adjustment there is not really the revenue streams as projected for the insurance portion. We've actually, after the budget, in our budget meeting we had last time, have gotten a new budget number as far as our proposed IGT number. The transfer amount didn't change. What it's changed as far as the received amount. And what has happened is, through the conversations with myself, the chief, and the consultants, is they reflected a decrease, and they're now saying that decrease is minimal overall and not as large as they projected as originally. The formulation comes from those organizations, not from us. It's not really a one-to-one analysis on how it works. There is a true formulation that has to go through to it, and that comes back from Anthem's and Calviva's feedback on how that number is calculated. So we're seeing a larger increase within that factor, but we're also seeing some adjustments within capital improvements to try and to compensate for some of the items that we feel are important within the capital improvement plan, as far as not just on logistics, but as well as operational standpoints. So we'll go kind of through that information as well. We'll talk a little bit more about the capital improvement plan and how that plays out. It was a great accomplishment for us to come together and actually put that book together. It really does take the team to sit down and say, okay, what is your priorities? And not just what are your priorities, but what are those projects? And then trying to assess what does that dollar amount look like for those projects. It's really a cumbersome project to go through and say, okay, what does it entail? What does it take? What is the engineering? What is this? What is that? So we've come together and get those numbers together so we can talk about that and have an objective. Just like every year, we really want to look future. We want to look further out, not just next year, but further out as well. That's what our capital improvement plan, we take it as a 10-year chunk. Some municipalities will take 5. We like to look at a 10 because we do want to look long term. Okay, and we do that as our revenue streams and as well as our expenditure streams, which is how we have that conversation when it comes to unfunded liability and pension obligations and things of that nature. At this point, I really just want to kind of open it up and see where there's some items, maybe within the general fund, we can start there and see if there's any conversation points or departments that some of you council members would like to start at. And then I think we can kind of go further into the budget, and go into internal services, the enterprise funds, and again, the capital improvement at that time, just to kind of give us an organized fashion how we go through this presentation. So again, I'd open up to council and see what departments you guys would like to discuss, and we'll go from there.
Where would you guys like to start?
I got a question on where the fund is to help the business owners with their building improvements. We were going to use, I think, funds from the transportation fund for that, up to $25,000 aggregate, up to $2,500 per person or per business applying for those loans for their business. Is that in the budget somewhere?
The $25,000 that is allocated for out of the transfer or the transit fund into a loan program, is that what you're referring to, the $25,000? That is actually reflected into the other funds column because it is a special fund. Not a lot of transactions come in and out of there. That number and that page is actually page 91 of your budget book, property cleanup and demo fund. And you'll see the actual balance of that fund is $25,000.
If I might, in addition to that, we have been working on a council request for a facade improvement program. which would be in addition to the nuisance abatement program.
Correct.
Okay, and that's also reflected? I think that's the confirmation you're looking for.
That's the confirmation I'm looking for. Is that in the same fund on page 91?
It'd be a different fund. Are we making full action on that yet to make that transfer?
Okay, but we can make that transfer.
Yeah, we can still make that transfer and get that done. So it's not reflective in this, this sheet yet, but we can make that allocation.
You're going to bring that to council, and we're going to vote on it, and then if
Yeah,
it
because
passes, it'll be
because
part of
the
it.
formal action hasn't been taken, we're still having that conversation. It won't reflect it at this point in time.
When we have that conversation, maybe we could also talk about even expanding that into a kind of a hub type of grant too. You know, not just facade improvements, maybe some sort of economic assistance as well, if that money is there. But we can have that discussion when you bring that back to council.
We would need to bring, yes, absolutely, an item back to council, and we have been planning to do that.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah.
and then council could approve transferring funds for something like that.
Correct. So any transfer
Of that
out of
nature.
funds and into funds, it's going to go through the appropriate process as council action. That's why we go through the budget process, and you see that transfer form, so that's really transparent.
But it's budgeted for the year.
So it's,
There are funds available that can be transferred to a specific program once we create it.
It's going to come out of reserve, not out of the operational for that fiscal year. So that's why you don't see it as a budget dollar yet. It'd actually be a reserve transaction.
So I got a question in regards to what Councilmember Robertson saying. So when we were discussing it prior in our city council meetings, I guess what framework did we have to do at that time to put in our budget? If it's not in our budget, correct? It's because you're stating that you're gonna have to go take it out of other funds. What funds would you, and not talking about reserves, what funds would you be looking at removing or taking from to compensate on this project? 'Cause this is a good, important project. And I thought we were under the, I thought we were the understanding that we had made it clear that we wanted that set for this year.
yeah,
So, I mean, it's something that we should probably talk about today and make sure that we carve it out and take it out somewhere today, so we know that we specifically have it in policy and set.
yeah. And then I just want to take it one step further is, when will business owners be able to apply for that loan?
So the nuisance abatement one, they can do now.
Okay.
But the facade improvement program, we have been doing research to bring that forward. The plan was to use the same loan format as the nuisance abatement and the same funding source.
That's correct.
The program itself, we have had discussions about how to form it and the criteria, and we'll be bringing that forward. So that is fine. We can carve that out and allocate it now and bring so it is in the budget, and bring the parameters to you of the program for, as soon as we have them defined for finalization. And let you know we're ready to implement. So
What do we want to, I mean, I'm sorry, were you done, sir?
Yes.
Sorry. What do we want to go ahead and, I mean, I was under the understanding that we were going to establish policies and we're going to establish a certain amount of revenue that would be budgeted, and then we would, formulate I thought we were actually even talking about that you guys would bring back to us a plan that would be brought from other cities, and we would have that, use the same format, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, with the facade improvement program, we discussed seeing what other cities do and bringing it back. And it has been on our radar. We just haven't been able to bring it back yet. But it is something that is on our list, and we have discussed and are working on. So I think we can probably get that here in the next month or so.
Any amount of money you guys are planning, or do you guys more or less know what you guys as staff has reviewed into amount of what revenue amount we want to put in that budget and that amount to establish this?
My
this
recollection is that we had talked about 25,000, so it was similar to the demolition grant, but
That's correct, yeah.
the hub is the first, I've heard of that, but I get it that, since then, we have now seen some other needs, so
We've had
maybe it could-
COVID, and maybe we
Right.
could expand the scope of
Of
that money
that.
availability for businesses if needed.
Does council want to see that expanded so that we make sure we bring back the right program format?
And I don't know if it would just be forever, but maybe just for this year, just to provide some stimulus. People probably need money more than they need their facades improved for this year.
I think before we even, start talking about the amount, I think we need to come back, we can let staff review other cities and get some policies of what they have stated, what they have and procedures and come back to us and let us know. Let's establish the policies and procedures prior to getting the financial amount. I think that would be best.
If I'm hearing correct, council would not like to transfer funds at this time, but do that when we bring the program forward, because we can at that time. We can do it either time, but I think it sounds like you'd like to know what the program is before we move any funds out of the transit reserve.
That's
And
probably
again,
logical.
we will still have
Find the
the,
program
As
for
long as
put
we
the money in it.
if we don't spend it somewhere else.
Yeah.
there's you're not going to have an offset. Again, we're pulling from reserves when we're discussing that transaction, not current operational expenditures or net returns. So the funding source is still there. It's still readily available. That conversation as far as that policy and discussion and how will feed into how much, as far as our fiscal policies go around that funding source, that net difference that is available to be transferred out into that other fund, as far as a special revenue fund is still available. So we're open for that conversation and what that dollar looks like. So we'll, as our fiscal policy designates what that number looks like, will also be a calculation that we have for that staff report, so you're available to know what that
If
number
we,
looks like.
that sounds perfect, but if we can make it, I was hearing Councilman Robertson say that, in a form of a grant, but if we can establish something because of our, our uniqueness and we want to get people involved, businesses involved, if you guys can establish something, amongst yourself that maybe we can get our business owners to fulfill some kind of community service, that would make it, something. I mean, if you guys can look into that, would be great, I think, to get our community together and get our business people together to
Like an
donate.
in-kind type of transaction.
Like an hours or donate or help out our community in some way to make it a,
That might be an offshoot of the program. It's a
Make it a-
good idea, but maybe
make it-
for this year when people are really hurting.
Yeah.
Maybe just make that this
Yeah.
year, but next year, maybe
Yeah.
provide community service
I
in
mean, start thinking
return.
about some community service,
Something
some
in
people can
kind.
start gathering and some offsets and, I don't know.
But you still want to decide the policy now, and we can just say
Yeah.
it goes in effect the next year.
Yes.
We can still set up those policies now and just say, but waive those requirements maybe for this year.
Yeah, and the good thing about a policy too is we can establish one with the understanding that we're going to bring it back every year, right? So we can say, okay, this
Tweak
year,
it.
this is how we want to establish this, direct staff to bring this back on an annual basis, probably just at the budget process, right? We want to have that conversation as part of the budget process, because again, you can see at your fiscal analysis on where we're at, and well, maybe there's more that you want to put into that fund at some point in time. Well, it takes an analysis, a financial analysis, to say, well, where we're going to pull that money from, right? So we can put it as part of this process to readdress that policy, but we can make that transaction or that policy decision here in the short term.
Well, I actually have a budget question. So on page 58, under the Senior Center Nutrition Program, I know because of COVID, our senior nutrition program has grown exponentially. Is the increase, is that going to be, how many seniors are we budgeting to provide nutrition for the next year? I mean, I don't know if it's going to be 200, 300, close to the 300 we have now, but is it going to be, are we budgeting for 200, 250, what, 175?
Mayor and City Council, at this present time, we have funding in a donation account that would get us through June and July for sure at 275 seniors per day. We also have working with CDBG funds to continue on, even if we open up to provide meals to seniors, both at home and at the senior center site. Once COVID ends, we could get back on board with FNAAA, and they would provide the free lunches at the center. And then our goal would be use the funds that we receive from CDBG, and we're also working with the school district. The school district is resubmitting a grant after the summer to allow us to continue on for free lunches for the whole school year. So that would be from August, when they start beginning school, all the way through June again. So then we could do delivery and on-site once the senior center opens.
But I'm
So
saying-
both programs could be covered by grants, but our goal is to feed I'll just give a range, 200 to 275 for the whole fiscal year.
Right, we're gonna feed our seniors. We're planning to feed who we're feeding now.
Correct, that's our goal,
Okay,
which would be an expansion in the past.
right.
And that is largely through grants as opposed to a line item on page 58. It is largely through these other partnerships and grants that are being pursued.
Correct.
Well, I'm not even questioning where the money comes from or where we're finding it. I'm just wanting to make sure that in the effort to balance the budget, that we are not taking away from our seniors in our community. And in fact, we need to, if anything, do more for them.
And as you can see from the new inserts that you have now, as far as your narratives, some of their goals and measurement points would be to sustain what we're currently doing. So you can see for our estimate actuals this year, around 250 individuals per day. So the community service director is actually looking to sustain that as far as one of his target points for the fiscal year of 19, or for 2021. So you can see as that as one of his measuring points. So it is an objective for the city to try and sustain and continue to operate in that nature. Obviously, we're looking for funding mechanisms to continue that too as well, though.
Mike, I have a question. So at this point, we haven't turned away any seniors.
No.
Okay.
We did for only a short period of time because typically when we turn seniors away is because we'd already ordered meals and the order was already placed, so we tell them to come after 12 if no seniors show up. If that makes sense, because we have to order like 2 or 3 days in advance so they have time to prep. Most of the time they show up, and we've always had 1 or 2 didn't show up, so yeah, we're not turning people away.
I just want to say, good job. You guys went from 125 to 275, so you guys are doing a really
Yeah,
outstanding.
Liz Martinez, Recreation Coordinator, puts in a lot of time, city staff, volunteers. I think you saw that list at Monday's presentation between SIVA and all the organizations, Chicago Pizzas, Brandon Shoemaker going out, volunteers. We got to thank Moses and Gabriel from MV Transportation, the transit drivers delivering. So I appreciate your comment, but trust me, it was a big group effort.
Yeah.
It is a big deal.
It's just a reflection of our community,
Correct.
that we all come together for
Absolutely.
this.
And actually, you can see that large number too reflect within your narrative, because his target point was like 35, because that was his overall average at that point in time. But you can see it actually from COVID, it jumped from 35 to
Sure.
100 to 250, and what that number is now.
Big.
So
Right.
it really was a team effort across the board.
While you're up there, Mike, can
Yes.
I ask you a question, not really related to this, related to another park, Lincoln Park? Is the budget impact of the Lincoln's Memorial, the Lincoln Park Memorial, Veterans Memorial Park, taken account of in this budget? For instance, I know the city wants to put up, a reader board at the corner there of Rose and Second, Rose and McCall, and we're going to do some things with the plaza itself when the statue comes in of the veteran. Is that in this budget?
Yeah, the American Legion would cover the whole full expense of the redoing the brickwork and everything, because it came in way under than what our original estimate was from a masonry. And so Public Works would just budget their normal, just the daily maintenance sprinklers, which would be ongoing anyway. So it's not going to have an impact on their budget too much, because it's going to be updated, but very similar in the past. As far as the marquee, we've not budgeted for a full marquee because they're coming in about 40 to 50. I am working with the company that has a marquee on Whitson and Floral. He's willing to cut us a deal, and so I just have to get some estimates from him to where he would do some ads on the space, and we could do our programs, but we would have a longer space of times for our programs. In other words, I believe the current one is 6 seconds. He said he would go up to 8 to 10 seconds. So when you're promoting an event, we'd have a longer time. They might have less ads in between our programs. So that would be a way we could get that installed at Lincoln with no cost to the city.
So the person who owns the marquee will fund it and install it, and in return, he'll just sell ad space, is that right?
Correct, that's how he gets his funds back. But we could do more programming to promote the T-ball, fireworks show, any kind of program.
Because I thought it was originally conceived of as just being a city-only marquee for just city events.
That's
for
our
sports
goal,
events, arts,
To get a nice
community,
one,
nonprofits.
our minimum quote was $32,000.
Okay.
I know I talked about that marquee with you, Mike.
Yeah.
Are we looking at getting a nice marquee, or are we getting a little, 24-inch? Because we talked about that too. if we have to get something and settle for something small that's really not going to be something that people can see, then we'd rather wait, where we can get something nice like Dinuba.
Yeah, no, we were looking at a nice marquee with like a rock base with the city logo, nice and bright,
Yeah.
American Legion. I have some samples. No, we weren't, yeah, you can go get a $13,000 to $14,000 marquee, like a smaller one at the school, but you have to sit there and, adjust your eyes, and
Yeah,
it serves a purpose, but our purpose was have a nice marquee that really
Exactly.
promotes our events. So we weren't going to settle for just putting one up that we weren't going to, wish we did in 2 years from now, kicking
Right.
ourselves.
Is the American Legion, are they considering funding any of the marquee?
Yes,
Okay.
because of the masonry.
They'll
The
fund
person willing to do the
part.
masonry really dropped his price in helping us because he loves Selma. So their president said that they could probably help with the marquee now because of the savings there.
So we'll be seeing that MOU here within the next budget cycle.
Hopefully next, actually, month, a month and a half. We got put on hold a little bit with COVID because of the masonry guy, but he's back to work, so we'll get the MOU finalized to council approved, and we can start to work.
And the statue's supposed to be in what by?
Statue should be done August or September. American Legion's goal is to do a full grand opening on Veterans Day in November.
No, it's really going to enhance our downtown. It's gonna
Correct.
look really good.
So, Mike, I have a question.
Sure.
I know we started this conversation as that we would budget a marquee, and then we talked about that the individual was going to want to maybe see if he could do it, and then you guys said something about the American Legion. Where's the city's standpoint? Are we wanting to purchase our own, or are we wanting to go on a joint venture with a company? What's the recommendation of the staff?
Originally, my recommendation was to have our own, so you didn't have to have all the promotions for a while. That we could just promote anything that the city and the city council would set a policy like we did with the other one. That was our goal because you didn't have to worry about the ads. So when somebody stops on McCall and Floro, they're just going to see programs or services or updates from the city.
So then-
I just think it would be more, you'd accomplish more and you'd get the word out on events, more programs than having a
So-
couple ads.
So our goal is to purchase our own, and to purchase a good size, you're looking at a neighborhood of 45,000?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how much would the American Legion be contributing towards that? Are they just doing the masonry around it, or?
Yeah, I have to
Except
speak
40.
to them. I don't want to throw out them out, but
Okay.
And in regards to the MOU that they're going to request, if they donate, does that make it theirs, or does it make it the city still?
no, it'd make the cities.
But they would have their logo on it, right?
Yeah, the agreement in the MOU will read, they'll have a logo, and then they would be automatically included in their Flag Day exchange, or like their Memorial Day when they put the flags up. They just want to make sure that they weren't going to be cited when they had an event.
All
That's-
their events would be on the marquee then?
Yeah, which is very few. But they just wanted to make sure they could put their event up, and we'd put their logo up, and they were satisfied with that.
So just a note too as well, we were looking at Measure K as potentially a funding source for that project as well, but as you're aware with TOT dropping and things of that nature for next fiscal, that you see a decrease coming into that capital improvement project too as well. So I think what Mike's saying is we're looking at all options, the project is still a valid project that he'd like to pursue, but we're looking at all funding sources and potentially partnerships to be able to get that project running.
Okay, do you have any questions? You good?
Bill, I wanted to talk about your fiscal budget department, 00 department, Isaac.
Sure.
Yeah, I noticed that you have your sales and use tax. On the first go-around, you had it budgeted at 5,489,936, and now you have it increased by 5
What page is
million.
this? Jim, what page?
Jim,
are you
what
on?
page?
That's on page 2.
Page
Yeah, I
Three?
noticed that you did
Three.
a,
Three.
it's a sales use tax,
Sure.
and you had, at the first time you had it actually less, you had it for 5,489,936, and now you're up it with 55,077,747.
Mhm.
Are you anticipate an increase in the user tax?
So the number we use, again, comes from consultants as far as our sales tax. They give us a multiple tiers, most likely optimistic and things of those nature. We use kind of a more conservative number. So when we do have flux within our budget, like 20,000, like I presented in the beginning, we look to sales tax to kind of compensate that to make sure.
'Cause,
Because
you know-
20,000 within a sales tax number of a budget of 5.5 million is kind of an immaterial amount to flux between that two. I wouldn't definitely say we'd be shifting it for 100,000 per se, because that is more of a material amount, but it's a way for me to shift and balance the budget.
So are you anticipating that amount, Isaac,
That is the number we're
I mean,
participating,
you're-
yes, within that range.
within that range? Okay, I was going to be okay with the 54, but, I mean, 5, but, okay.
Yeah.
I'm okay. And the other question, too, I noticed that you have you increased the building on all of them, the building internal charges on all of our, fire, police, all our, seniors and all that stuff. I noticed you made some changes there in dollar amounts.
Yeah, again, those funds are similar to the general fund. We're going to continue to tweak and adjust. What happens is when that internal service fund gets a tweak, then we got to spread that number across the board.
And then I know-
So that number impacts the rest of the budget as well.
And I noticed that all the departments, you increased the data processing numbers there, I see.
Same thing,
From
going
every
through
department, I noticed that,
Yeah, going through that process.
know.
One prime example is we turned from the last budget conversation that we had to this budget conversation was our archiving for the social media. That was a couple $1,000s that wasn't compensated for. It was actually within the PD budget before, but it's actually a City of Selma thing. We all need to do, especially with the City Hall now having its own social media. So we pulled it into data processing. So again, that's going through us, tweaking through the process to make sure that we're accounting for everything. So you'll see some small tweaks. If there was a substantial one, like the ambulance fund, I would definitely call that out to you.
Okay, then.
Isaac, I have a question. So these figures here that you've used, these are more of a conservative figure, not the figure or the actual figure that the consultant has given you?
For sales tax?
Yes.
So sales tax, again, they give us a range. We do I do still do my assessment of that number
Sure.
to kind of get it to where I see it should be as well. It's not just taking their number and running with it.
Yeah.
It's me looking at that number and saying, okay, well, how do I feel comfortable with that number and kind of tweak it in that sense of the way as well. It's not far off. You're never going to see me
Okay.
taper off far from their numbers because they are a solid number. I do use their number as a most likely number. So you're not going to see me deviate too far away from that.
Okay. So just a little undercompensating, just.
Correct. So consultants are great,
Right.
but I sit at the desk and I see those numbers come in a more realistic time.
Sure.
I know what our market's doing. I know what's going to come in potentially next year or in the future years. So you're still going to have me have that assessment within that.
Okay.
Again, because sales tax are driven off. For example, if a permit just got pulled for a local retailer to come in that we've projected, that's going to be an impact. And I'm pointing to that Office Depot or Office Max location. We have a projection for a retailer to come in there. That location per se didn't have a large sales tax volume, but that projected retailer coming in will have a larger impact.
Okay.
So it's me know what's coming in the market and them not up to date and current because we haven't sat down and say, hey, what is your projection within
Right,
that?
right.
So I'm compensating for a little bit of that as well.
Okay.
The name of that retailer is running rampant on social media. When's the city going to be releasing the name?
official, guys?
Yeah.
We have been working to try and get in touch with them, and they have not been responding. So I think we'll check exactly where we are in the building permits, and if they are actually under construction with TIs, then I think we have a firm footing. But Tracy and I have been checking on that. So thank you for your patience.
Again.
And that's really just trying not to get ahead of the developers. We want to be a partner with them and be
Yeah.
able to work with them on that. So,
It's kind of already out there, but people want to know, they want the official announcement. Well, let us know.
Okay.
okay.
One more question, Isaac.
Sure.
Hey, I noticed you changed the salary full-time status numbers there. I noticed, and the fire department, police department, across the board. And I also noticed the holiday pay, and I also noticed the fleet internal charges there on the departments,
So again, when we went through the process, and Heather and me sit down, and we go through every single department.
There's a big difference, there's a number, there's
I don't
some
think there's
numbers.
large differences per se. Was there?
Some of your fleet charges are a little more, and I notice, some status numbers are higher. Is that, and then the health insurance and all that stuff, that's changed a little bit.
Well, so what it does is when you're shifting employees around and things of that nature, you're going to see those flux. I don't think we shifted numbers around per se. What you're gonna, actually are going to see is, for example, let's say an individual like an accountant got budgeted at a level B for 12 months. Well, really it should be half B, half C, right? So that's finance department doing that cleanup and making sure we compensate for everything. There were some issues where we found, I think it was in the insurance as well, where staff was actually budgeting in lieu of as well as insurance. So that's some of the process we go through as far as cleaning up to make sure it's tidied up. So you will see those adjustments. But the overall net, again, was very immaterial.
Building on what Councilman Avalos is saying, if you look at the police field operations page 29 of 96, this is the qualitative description. One of the objectives for fiscal year 2021 is increase the number of officers on each shift. Chief, are we going to meet that objective this year?
Yes, we are. Because 6 are coming from special.
When you use your mic.
Oh, sorry. Can you guys hear me? No? Now? Yes. 6 are coming from special units. 2 SROs are coming back to patrol.
So both are coming from the school, that's
Yes.
official?
Yes, both are coming back.
Because we didn't know that, I think a couple weeks ago, it was still in the air.
Yeah.
We haven't received any additional, unless the chief has. I haven't
No, I
received
have
any.
not.
So, but we are planning on it because the last communication we had from them was looking at the worst-case scenario
Yeah.
for them, which means us getting more officers back.
Yeah.
It looked like the deficit of the school district has increased too in the last couple weeks.
Yes.
Okay.
So pretty sure they're coming back. There's 2, and then the 3 tactical response team officers are coming back to patrol. And then Matt Hughes also
And
be
Matt
coming
Hughes.
back, the
So
homeless
how many
officer.
will there be on each shift?
It'll
Patrol,
be,
including
let's see,
sergeants.
Patrol, it will be 6 officers, 6, 6, 6, and 5.
Wow.
So they're pumped up a lot
That-
because 2
we've
of those
never
shifts
had
only
that
have 3
level.
officers now. Yeah, it's a lot. It'll be a lot.
Yeah,
So,
our shift ratios now currently were more like 4s and 5s. So,
Oh, yeah.
Which again kind of assists with overtime, minimum staffing levels, and things of that nature. So
Absolutely.
it's going to be a
There-
large
the
impact. to
knock
see
on
that.
Selma has been in the past, we don't have enough officers on patrol, we don't have enough people, we never see them.
right.
This will effectively double the number
Yes.
on the street, and that'll mean citizens will feel safe and see more officers on the street. I think that's great. I think that's a real
Yeah,
benefit.
I do too.
Providing a better level of service.
Yes.
For our city and for public safety.
I agree.
And that 4 is 6, 6, 6, and 5. What do those shifts represent?
2 are midnights. The 6, 6 are midnight shifts, and then 6, 5 will be day shift.
Got it. And is the management, is the objectives, the organization chart staying pretty steady as to what we saw in the last meeting, or is that still in negotiation or in flux?
We're
or-
still discussing it. We, Teresa and I met with management yesterday regarding it, and they came up with some ideas. So we're still synthesizing that, and but it'll be the same, pretty much the same. Currently, what it is, or with the 1 commander and 1 detective sergeant, which was presented last time.
Nice. So it sounds like
So-
everybody's talking and negotiating. And,
Oh yeah, yeah.
in the
We're
city
talking.
and
They're
the
bringing up some
groups.
pretty good ideas.
Great.
Some ideas on maybe we can incorporate some things.
And that process for changing a unit modification, which is what we're talking about, if we, moving from 2 lieutenants to 1 commander, that's a unit modification, and it's not an MOU negotiation. It is it is guided by the employer-employee relations resolution. So we let them know what we're proposing, and that, like the chief said yesterday, we met with them to discuss that. And as he said, they had some things that we now need to think about. So we're very open to listening to different ideas and concerns, and we're processing that, as he said. So we
That sounds
we
like
do
that's
have to get back to them.
Important thing, to keep the dialogue open and, make
Absolutely.
a collaborative decision. And, you came on as chief, 3 months ago? So, I mean, you're still getting the lay of the land, and having to adjust to this budget in these circumstances has to be especially difficult. So I
Yes.
think it's great that you're doing that collaboration there and getting more patrols on the ship. How much of these negotiations are a result of the finances of the city this year? If this had been a normal year, would you be considering the commander and the lieutenants, or is
No,
this?
to be candid, the way it is now, we don't have them filled. They're acting, or sergeants filling the 2 lieutenant spots. But of course, that would be better, right? 2 lieutenants and 5 sergeants. That's better for the department, for the city. But yeah, because of the current economic situation, we've got to make adjustments.
And so nothing's set in stone. I mean, if something happens, it can always change and go back when the finances are better. Is
I
that
hope
the
so,
case?
yes.
Okay.
I hope so. And that is what I would espouse to them too,
Yeah.
and what I am telling them. I hope they believe that.
And just to jump on that too as well, these, especially for North Shore and these NHR positions, this is something we look at throughout the year, not just something we have during the budget process. It's really an operational factor. So you want to gauge that throughout your year, not just as you have this conversation. So just like I review financials as far as how we're looking at the budget process, what our quarterlies look like, those are conversations I think you continue to have.
And just to build upon that, we did indeed share with the group that, this is truly a way to deal with COVID. We are trying to maintain staffing levels, keep our commitments to our employees through our MOUs, still create incentive promotional opportunities. It's just this reorg changes, by 1 less potential promotion, or 2 also, I guess, with the sergeant. But there still are promotional opportunities. It is indeed, because of COVID, that is really has a big impact, and every department has looked at ways to make strategic cuts to still deliver services, and I think the increased patrol is something that is very, very positive, and discussed how that has been a morale issue in the past, and so getting a larger patrol definitely is a positive. The other thing, I agree that an org chart is not set in stone. They are things that can be malleable, and I point to the fact that this council has really supported public safety. And has brought back many positions. In the short time I've been here, we have, really brought back a lot of positions. So for folks to say, once you give it up, you never get it back, that's not what I've seen from this council or from this. When we have the funding, this is one of the top priorities, and I've seen the council put their money, the city's funds to those priorities. So, it is a downturn in the economy we need to get through, but I think the proposal, we want to go through this properly, and we want to still provide the services to our community.
And I think you're tying this back to our goals, as a council, to our priorities. And the priority that I know I talked about at the last budget meeting was, people over things, people over infrastructure. We've got a good team here. We don't want to just get rid of people if we can afford it, if we can find a way. And I think it's important to find that way, even if it's a little painful this year. Keep as many people on as we possibly can. Keep everybody on and keep the team moving forward, so that when we get through this, we won't be understaffed, and we will still be able to deliver the level of services that we have.
Joe, I have a comment to you, Joe.
Yes.
You're right. Anytime you do a budget situation like us right now, and you're a part of the budget because it's important, but also 2 things in your department, any department, is fire, public works, or city staff, whatever. It's all about the how do you take care of your people, but also how the people take care of you, the morale-wise, you know what I mean? If they're comparable, you know, very happy and they're safe and they feel comfortable, they'll stand behind you, 100%. They'll go the extra mile. I know that for a fact, you know what I mean? It's, the quality of the leadership, but also when people stand behind you and they like it, they'll stay here. You know what I mean? If they don't like it, they're going to leave. And, we experienced that over quite a time in the city of Selma, okay? I'm not going to lie to you. I'm going to cut to the chase, okay? You're here now, Joe. You're it now. So you got to step to the plate. People are going to rely, and the morale and everything's going to rely on you. It falls on your shoulders. And the idea, if there's an old saying, talk to the troops, see what works and what doesn't work. And if they don't like it, well, we try to find a common ground. I always believe in that. Okay, and I know you got your hands full, Joe. Okay, all right. You got young people. You got a young officer group here. So just remember that, okay?
Thank you.
I want these officers to come home safe. You know what I mean?
too.
I see more patrols in the street than I've ever seen before, and I've seen the officers pulling people over, and that's visibility. It's increased. Before, we were shorthanded, troops were working overtime, you know what I mean? When you have officers working overtime, they get stressed out. It's a stressful, life.
Oh, yeah.
So, but that's all I got to say.
Okay.
We'll move on.
Very, very good. Now, let's get back to the budget, guys. But, Joe, keep up the good work. I know you've been here a short time, but just
Thank
keep
you.
up your good work.
Thank you.
So, Teresa, how has our budget for the planning department changed? Is there anything that you adjusted for that, or is it basically the same budget that we had last year?
No, it is a bit of an adjustment. I think we had a little bit less in revenues, and we are.
What page?
Great question.
45.
35.
So yes, we do have a little bit less in revenues, anticipating maybe a bit of a slowdown in applications. And we also have a decrease in professional services. We also, as I mentioned, are holding the community development director position. We have gone out and recruited for that a couple of times. It is something that is a very key strategic position, and since our last meeting, I really have been giving that a lot of thought, that I know that this is, economic development is one of council's top priorities as well. One thing that we could do that I would suggest is we could continue to do a recruitment. We could have an open recruitment because the market is changing. There may be a larger pool as things have slowed down. Maybe there's more people that are interested in looking for a position like this, and we could do an open recruitment. And if we find a candidate that really fits the bill, that has planning expertise, then we can come back to you with a budget adjustment, and we could reduce consultant services and fill that position. Right now, we need these planning services, and we went out to bid when I first got here and brought on 2 great reputable firms and have them on a multi-year contract so that we don't ever get in the position where we only have our eggs in one basket with one firm. That way we can ramp up or ramp down depending on the type of services we need. So, we want to continue the work that we have, the things that we have in the irons we have in the fire with them. But I also understand that, this really is a key position. So my suggestion might be that we open it up, open-ended, continue to look for the position, and when we find the right fit, because it has been a challenge to find that technical expertise of a planner with a director, but when we do, come back and bring you an adjusted budget.
I'd just like to say a couple of comments in regards to that. When I got on the council, one of the biggest points was our bottlenecking of our planning department, meaning that the flow going in wouldn't come out, and it's still not coming out, from what we've seen, right?
Well,
When you talk about having two great companies that we've contacted, the concern I have is we need to have someone that has a sense of our community. The sense, the contact and the flow of what goes on in our community. And having two great companies that work for us is great. But I truly believe that our planning department, with not hiring a planning director, that's fine, but if we could get someone in there right now to get the pulse of our community, because one of the biggest concerns I get is from developers going to my office and somebody else, you guys' office, and they're saying, hey, we don't have that good communication. And I mean, I would hope that if we're not gonna hire the individual, we're gonna put a hold on him for now. Let's go back and look at our department and restructure the department so we can get the bottlenecking out and get the flow going.
Your point about a sense of community is very important. I think that's come up, we've seen that come up in the past, for example, with self-help, and had we maybe understood the neighborhood's concerns earlier on, but the process did flesh that out. So I understand your point about sense of community. The bottleneck, the firm that QK has gotten through the bottleneck, and now we are working on projects that have had not formal applications, but what do we call them? The complementary reviews. We're working on getting those to a point where they actually have a complete application. So we did get up through the bottleneck, and they have brought 16 different projects in the time we've been working with them through the planning process successfully. There are about 11 major projects that we continue to work on with developers, including some national home builders, to keep those going in the pipeline as well. So we have seen things successfully get through there, but I hear your point, and we want to address the local need and can continue to work on that. And I think by continuing to look to fill that position and have somebody in-house, I think that's an important step. If council, I don't know what council thinks about that plan. Did I address your, and did I address your concerns, Councilmember
Yeah.
Trujillo?
Yes.
Thank you.
Teresa, you're right, Johnny. In the past, when I came on a council, we had departments of that magnitude, before Tommy turned around. But you're right, he's right, because really, when we had people in play, it was good communication. We'd be able to actually streamline their operations and their buildings permits and everything, facilitate some of those issues on the table, have a better understanding, being better partners, because really in developing, it's time is money. If we can help them speed up their process without delaying it, and there's gonna, there are always going to be some issues on the table, but it's no big deal. But I think if we can actually streamline some of these issues and not to create barriers, oh, you got to do this legally or whatever. We got to look at the plans, simple plans. If it's legal, that's why we have the attorneys. They can tell if it's legal or not. We have a planning department. The variance, okay, you got to have this. They look at these plans simple. Back in the past, that's how they did it, and they kind of streamlined the issues. And the developer was very happy and moved on, and they saved a lot of money, and they helped build this town. Raven, Nelson, all these guys, were here at that time. So Johnny's right in a way. You need somebody in those apartments that kind of facilitate and help them, not create these roadblocks on them, because they get frustrated and they'll say, "Man, I don't want to come to Selma," or I have other businesses. We don't want to do that. We don't want to be that person.
Quick question on clarification on your process that you're proposing. You want to have an open application. What would that do to the actual process itself to have an open application as opposed to putting a finite timeline on a call for a community development director?
That would allow us to wait until we have good qualified candidates to interview.
It wouldn't give you a deadline, so it
Right.
help your net capture more qualified candidates by not having a deadline.
Yes, because at the last meeting, I stated that we would keep looking for talent, But, in addition to us shoulder tapping and things that we do of that nature, I think having it as an open recruitment will certainly help, because that's how a lot of people look for a position. They do go on the city's website or on a search engine to see if it's out there. So I think doing both is important for us to continue to let the community know, or the region know, that we are looking to fill this position. I mean, I know my colleagues know, but keeping it as an open recruitment, I think, would also help.
And when you're going to your meetings, you've got it out there,
I do talk to my colleagues about it.
your colleagues
yes.
about what we're looking for as a city as well, right? So you've got
Correct.
it out through your networking
Right.
also.
It is a challenging, as you know, position. Planning is very technical and actually is complicated. We do need to get to the, come up with the solutions, though. And I think working through complicated projects and coming up with solutions can take some time. Recently, an example would be we have a developer that wants to build 3 units in an area that is not zoned that way. It becomes costly, too, when you have to do all these types of changes per our ordinances and per the plans that we have in our general plan and zoning ordinance. So, but working through it together, sitting down, discussing options, looking at different ways in the code, we looked at, look, you can do these as an accessory dwelling unit, and then you wouldn't have to have a zoning change and a general plan amendment. And so there are legal ways, but it takes somebody who understands all of those legislative changes and the codes and the processes to get to that end result and having that discussion. So I think I just wanted to kind of expand upon that. We want to be business friendly and get through these processes quicker. We do have still irons in the fire to get our SB2 funding. Our housing element should be going to the Planning Commission in July, and we will be done with our rezone of property, so we can then get our SB2 money to do our zoning ordinance update, which will help as well. And we are applying for LEAP funding to add to that SB2 funding. That will help us streamline our process and the way we log all of these applications, so that we have a more efficient system internally that will, I think, help with some of the past confusions we've had in the development department. With, new people coming in and not knowing where to find certain documentation because the past system was a little bit more antiquated, I guess.
So can I just, I don't want to keep on beating a dead horse, but one question, 2 comments. One question is, so you're stating to me that in order for our department and the planning department to get to at a par level, we need to bring a planner. We can't go in there and our staff go in there and figure out how we can facilitate and maybe even bring a consultant in just to help us out to get to a point where we can set policies or somewhat to get it a little more fast track. That's 1. 2 comments is, in regards to the comment you said in about that individual having a lot. I've gotten many calls in regards to what the previous administration was doing in that planning department, and what they're doing now has done a 360, and it's maybe prolonged them. And those are my concerns, and that's the reason why I want to make sure that we either get on the ball, if we're going to be pro-growth, and we need to get that. If we know that is one of our priorities, to become pro-growth and move along the city faster, and we're actually saying to ourselves that we're going to set this aside, I don't know what I'm actually saying. What I'm saying is that when can we get someone? And if we can't hire one, why can't we get a consultant? Because for me to have 2 people, 2 outside agencies that don't have the pulse of our community, we're missing the boat. We're missing the time frame.
So I think in regard to the 2 consultants, the one is specifically only on the housing element, and the one that is our on-call planner that specifically works on the things, that applications that come in, handling questions for people that are considering applying, that person is 3 days a week. So I think having somebody in-house 5 days a week, full-time, would be a huge benefit. And that would, it is a challenge, though, to find that. So in light of that, we could increase the hours, but we have budgeted the consultant at those hours. And we have allowed some overages when we have projects that need that, and, for example, to get through the backlog. Knowing the community pulse, I think we have now also our economic development position filled. And, I hear loud and clear that we need to, when we think about a project and bringing it for a public hearing, that we need to be thinking about the entire neighborhood and continuing to communicate well with our business community so that we understand where something may be a good fit.
I think it's really important because, I've been in the construction industry for 20 years, and when you have a pro-development come into town and submit an application to fund and help low-income housing or low-income apartments, and they get slapped and they leave, it leaves a bad taste. And not only does it leave a bad taste with them, it spreads, and people talk. And I don't want to put our city, and I don't want to put our community in a position where we bring someone in, a builder like that, and he gets slapped because he doesn't have the sense of our community. And then it goes out and it's out in public, and the talk in our industry is, hey man, you better watch it in Selma. They don't have that pulse. And that's really important. And we need to really, really think, and as a council, we need to really set our sights. And it goes back to our CIP, we need to get to a point where we as five start saying we are pro-building, pro-growth, and we have people that are buying buildings here that want to build. How can we help them? We can't help them if we don't have a planning director here. So,
Teresa, I have one question, just quickly. I know we want to take a break,
Yeah.
so just, what my colleagues are also saying is just perfect example, like our spreadsheet, okay? On that development that we're talking about, that low, for the self-help that we it says here denied, but brought to council, and we all agreed that it wasn't the right fit, it wasn't the right location.
Yeah.
What I want to know is, what is our departments doing to encourage someone like them to say, we found this other lot, we have this area, this would work perfectly? Because from what I'm hearing is, it was just, sorry, it got denied, bye-bye. And that's not the reputation that we want to have here in Selma.
And I can, let me clarify, I want to share with you, because that's not the whole story. I have definitely been in contact with self-help since then. I immediately contacted them afterwards. And then we had a property owner that was interested, so I liaisoned between self-help and this property owner about this potential area. I pitched it to them to try and convene a meeting between the two. And self-help said that they're still interested in Selma, but they would be looking for projects that are properly zoned, that don't require a change of zone, that would be, basically, that would not have to go through a discretionary process of going to the Planning Commission and Council. It would be properly zoned, and they could proceed just through the planning process without going to public hearings. So basically, they'd be entitled by the zone to go there. So as we see something like that available, we will, and a property owner that wants to do that, we will most definitely reach out. While that was a difficult decision, they know that sometimes that happens. You think that it might be a good fit, and then when it gets through the public hearing process, realize that it isn't. And so we are still communicating with them when we have opportunities.
Okay.
Thank you. Good question. I'm glad you brought that up, because I don't want people to think we are all of a sudden not talking to partners that could be good in this community.
Okay, all right, so with that, we're going to take a 5-minute break. And we will reconvene
Okay.
at 10:50.
all your fault, Johnny.
What's up, Jim? Oh,
I'm just waiting for Bob to get back.
I wanted to see if you wanted us to kind of, like, did you want us to continue to work through lunch maybe, or do you want to?
I think we'll be done by lunch.
Do you, okay.
I think they're,
Okay.
I think we'll be done. But if so,
I just want to gauge what you're,
Well,
as
what-
I
what
wanted to
staff
tell
was
our
it?
fishing pressure.
oh, no. Yeah, as long as, I think we'll be done by lunch.
Okay, then we'll go through, any, we'll ask about any special funds, enterprise funds, and then CIP.
Yeah.
So like,
Okay, what time did you budget for staff? Half a day in the morning?
yeah, so through lunch, but we can,
Okay. Well, I think we'll be done, but if not, obviously we'll just still work on it.
thank you.
All right.
73.
It is.
Keep the windows.
So what's next? What are you going to bring up?
Oh, I think,
Okay, are you guys ready? Ready?
Okay.
You guys ready? All right. Okay, it is 9:55, and we're calling our special city council, 10:55, and we're calling our meeting back to order. So we left off talking about the planning department. Is there any other departments council wishes to have any inquiries or questions on?
Well, yeah, I kind of put a worksheet myself together, and what I would like to see is, and I know I request this, Teresa, in regards to our spreadsheet, so that we could stay on top of some of these projects that are going on. But, and I'm not being disrespectful, but I know that we don't get these, I feel, we don't get them and regular, yeah. I think we get it maybe quarterly, or we got them twice this year. But what I would like to see is we work on the top 3 projects that we know are going to be very vital to City of Selma. They're going to stabilize our economy. And what I was looking on, because I look at our spreadsheet, and I think, you know, I don't want to lose sight of where are we with these 3 projects that we thought we were ready to go, like Selma Grove with Cliff Titillion and the Rockwell Pond, Amberwood, which we kept hearing, okay, we're going to break ground, we're going to break ground. And then, of course, revitalizing downtown, because just like Councilmember Trujillo and I, you know, I just had 2 individuals come to me yesterday looking for office space. And I said, wow, you know, how'd you come to my office? I don't have a sign, I don't have any advertisement. And luckily, I mean, we do have a small little office, but we didn't advertise it. And I said, well, you know, we have this office, we talked about it, and said, I didn't think the person would want it, but they jumped on it. Now that I sent them over to Trujillo's because I didn't know they need some other space. I mean, so where I'm getting at is, you know, we have people that are interested and are coming to Selma, but I don't think that we're getting it out there. I mean, just like the little cupcake place that is vacant. And I've had 2 or a couple people tell us that nobody ever answers that phone that they have on there, which I don't think it's the chamber's number. I think it's the actual owner's number. Right? Yeah.
So when it comes to recruitment and attraction, absolutely, that is one of our top priorities, and Tracy is on that. Obviously, the last several months have been very much about stabilizing helping businesses through this COVID process, but we prior to COVID, we were gearing up for ICSC, updated the website to let people know about all the tools that we do have for business development. We're here to meet with anybody that is interested. We'll help them with site selection, look at, infrastructure needs they have. So if there is a business that is interested, we most definitely want to be of assistance to them. That is the essence of the economic development position. And Tracy has vast experience with that, so we'd be happy to do that. I'm also happy to meet with them as well. As far as our project list, you're right, we have been striving to do quarterly. Monthly is, or weekly is, biweekly is there. You don't see changes in projects, that quickly sometimes. So if quarterly, if I could just get it on maybe a more regular quarterly schedule, would that be sufficient for council, or would would you like to see every other month? We could
What I
probably do
was
that.
recommending is maybe what we could do is have a discussion. Like maybe we could do, if we don't have a workshop with all 5 of us here, maybe one of the council meetings, we can schedule 5 o'clock and we have that discussion to be able to go, or 5:30, whatever's easy, depending on the time frame. But I'm just saying something like that where we can specifically talk about these projects as where we
Okay.
are.
So if we continue with quarterly and really dial that in, and make them presentations. Is that what I'm hearing? That might really help.
Can I add something real quick? I invite, if you guys may? That's okay?
Absolutely.
The last time I spoke with you and I sat there and me and you talked, and we talked in regards to what the projects were. And I came to realization as a council member that there are some of these projects that we feel that they're something that should be potentially growing and going, but they haven't even pulled a permit.
That is correct. I'm glad.
And so in saying that, maybe it'd be better that you create a spreadsheet and don't put a time limit, but tell us, this project is here, they haven't pulled a permit, they're on this base. Then we, as a council, will know where they're at, so when people ask us, hey, what about this? We know that we know they're not gonna be built now. They're not,
Yes.
they might be in your discussion, but they're not actually relevant to what we are looking at for this year.
Okay, so a more detailed,
Well-
also improve the detail on this. For example, right now, the last page it says projects approved or not yet applied for, and that's the ones I think you were specifically talking about, Mayor Pro Tem Guerra, is these really large projects that we are touching often. We are touching base with the developer, but they are time consuming. They have not pulled a permit or done an application to get them really in the pipeline. They're still at a phase where they're doing a traffic study perhaps, or for example, Amberwood, they've been negotiating with the home builder, adding KB and Raven on that, which we also need to add on there. That one, they are actively working on negotiations. And so my point is that they're not in the pipeline. Once a project actually applies, they submit an actual application, we legally have to work on that and respond to it within 30 days. So even if it's a small project, we can't put it off. So, you were saying, like, can we work on the top 3? Somebody comes in they want to do a lot line adjustment or a parcel split or a gas station with a mini market, versus Selma Grove or Selma Crossing or the large, they're all, once they've actually applied, we have to process it. So I just wanted to also bring that up, is that we can't put, we want to treat them all well.
What I'm hearing is, from the Mayor Pro Tem and from Councilman Trujillo is, we are pro-development. We all are pro-development. I've heard it over and over. It's just, how do we take those words and put them into action? There's a certain level of frustration factor there because it's not happening fast enough. We have these 3 areas. Rockwell Pond is ready to go. Hampton wants to come in. We've got the grant for the park. It's really coming together. It doesn't happen very fast, But I think what I'm hearing, what I'd like to hear is just more of an update on where we are and where we're going to go on this in terms, and a timeline, rather than, hey, you know, this is where we're going, and God, government does work slow, and it's, you know, going to take a while. I'd like to see timelines. That's how we can hold you guys accountable, you know, for timelines and scheduling and when these things are going to get done. You know, on the spreadsheet, it's great to have that, but the timelines kind of makes an action plan, and then that gives us an accountability mechanism where we can provide our oversight function, you know, rather than just kind of listening what you're doing and telling you we've got a policy that we want, you know, development, but we got to go beyond that. And I think we have to motivate and encourage and make sure that these things happen in terms of our oversight function. North Selma, I mean, that's where the housing should be coming in. We've heard Amberwood's shovel ready for, you know, years now. So we're really hopeful that we want to get that in. We want to find a way to get that done. I know there's a developer that's out there getting bids on the sewer line. I'd like an update on that. Downtown renovations in Selma, I mean, there's these 3 areas. I think we're moving forward on that. Would like an update on those 3 areas. So I'd like to see an update on that on a monthly basis, even in terms of having a council workshop or having a council ad hoc committee, a rotating ad hoc committee where we get different members that really focus on this and look you guys in the eyeballs and say, where are we on this? What are we doing? You know, so that we can report back to our constituents. Is it's just a little vague and the time is a little ephemeral and it's not concrete. I would like more concrete timelines on where this is happening. And if they're the ones, if the developers are the ones that are not moving on this, then just tell us that. And then maybe we could have the developers come to a council meeting and look them in the eyeballs and say, where are you on this? When are you going to get going? They're under no obligation to listen to us, and we want to be partners with them. But at least we're moving the ball. At least we're trying to get something going. That's what I'm hearing, and I'd like to see more of that.
It is not us. We're waiting on them.
Yeah, and then it wouldn't be us delaying this process. It's them delaying the process. But at least we would know, and we would have regular status updates on this, on these projects, and on these particular areas.
I think there's a white elephant out there, and we all know it. You know, it's our infrastructure. And we know that, you know, we know that SKF has given Amberwood a direction as where they want to put their 42-inch line, and we also know that there's mechanisms that we as a city can actually see, which would help Raven, Amberwood, everybody. It would just open the doors. And I know we've been talking about it for a year and a half. Maybe it's something that we as a city council need to start talking in regards to ourselves, and with that, and maybe a joint agreement between Raven and Amberwood and the City of Selma. And I know that before Larry passed away, you know, God rest his soul, but he wanted to go back and have that kind of discussion and talk to the city in regards to that. And Amberwood's been pushing, and I know that SKF has rerouted them, I think for their benefit, not for the City of Selma's benefit.
Right.
So I think that we as a council and as a city, it would be good to maybe we threw the stone first and talked and got them all together and said, hey, what if we talk to you? Because you guys, last week we talked about a 0.5% increase for our residents, but if we took the first step and said, hey, let's get together with all our developers, you know, bringing in 2,500 homes would help our police department, would help our fire department, would increase our general fund from having a decrease of 1.4 to maybe increasing it to 16 million, you know, so that gives raises, that gives people jobs. So if we can start talking, maybe even if we talk to them and get them to know that our council is pro-growth, maybe they'll foot the bill halfway. Maybe but if we're not having those conversations, we're not going to be there.
And we are having conversations with them.
But it's not in regards to what the white elephant is out there. That's the
sewer.
That $4.8 million sewer.
Yeah, we are talking and I do also put whenever we meet with a developer in my biweekly report. But so bringing something to you about that, I mean, those things, I'm trying to make sure that you do get those. We are meeting with KB on a regular basis in Raven and looking at either zone of benefit or CFD. We have a formation team that has been, our financial consultants have also been helping with that. And we've really put together quite a few numbers for them that, it looks like this is something they are very committed to, and it's just finessing those numbers so they can finish their negotiations. We've contacted Lennar about also carrying that further because KB is looking at doing it to their project, which would be to Thompson. Lennar is further east, so that may get it to McCall. So we are exploring that as well. Lennar is, they have been working with engineering and they have reached out to planning to get the numbers to file their application for Amberwood. It's not shovel-ready. I don't know why that was said. I mean, they did think they would do their sewer this year, but in talking to the David Srimian, it looks like it's next year. They have spent most of this year negotiating with Lennar, from what I was shared with me. So that commitment to do that sewer line is there. It's just not happening in the time frame because of their negotiations. I understand that this is something that's been out there for Selma for a long time, and you've heard this a lot. So I get that it's frustrating.
In doing some of the research in this last couple of months, I've realized that we as a city are sitting back and we're being hopeful and we're wishing for growth. But what I've learned is that we're handcuffed by certain agencies that want to have their way to be built in Selma. SKF has a routing structure of how they want their infrastructure to benefit their growth pattern. We as a city need to go in there and have discussions with them because that Amberwood is our community. So if we can get, what all I'm asking is if we can get into discussions and us as a council, start looking into maybe if we have Raven Development, Lennar, which is, these three subdivisions, Dinuba, we have on Golden State, we know we have that 52-inch line. That's a community property from SKF. That's ours. That's a straight shot. It's a 42-inch.
42?
42-inch.
But that's the thing, we don't get this level of detail. We just get that you had the discussion, but we don't get into, because what I'm hearing right now is the issue really isn't the sewer line with Lennar, it's between the Seremians and Lennar. I'd love to know that, and then figure out what is that issue and how can we assist?
But it's a sewer line.
And can we drill down on that, and what can we do? If we have to override SKF on this, then we have to do that, for the betterment of our city, but we're not at that.
But if we could get to a
level
point where we could get a
at that
joint
point.
agreement and we get our city.
Okay. You guys, we're getting off topic. This is a budget workshop.
Yes.
But what I think would come in is, we understand it's staff responsibility to make these happen. But if us as a council were a little bit more informed, then we could give you better, clear directions and perhaps other directives to say, hey, well, if they don't want to do this, here's another route we would like you to explore. But I think perhaps once we get the budget done, sometime in July, if we create a presentation just to give us an update and have a discussion on all our projects, and maybe we can plan that on a regular basis, like council.
On a regular basis, I think the councils, and I think we're getting back to our priorities right here. We said we're
Right.
going to mix in the meeting. Our priority should be to stay on top of these projects, these areas, on a regular basis and have a
Yeah.
mechanism in terms of
But-
whether
but-
it's a monthly or, I think at the longest, a monthly meeting where we get what's going on in the nitty-gritty
The
level
timeline
with
will have to be
these projects.
determined based on need, but we also, as a council, have to understand we're going to be voting a lot of this stuff, and we have to maintain that line of being informed and actually negotiating and make sure we don't cross that conflict of interest. So we just got to be cautious, but it is doable.
Understood. Thank you all for the input. I clearly understand we need to be sharing much more information about the work we're doing with developers and where we are with projects.
I think we
So
could
I
avoid that
appreciate
conflict of
everybody's-
interest, definitely.
Pardon me?
I think we could avoid that conflict of interest
Right.
by meeting as a board, as a
Right,
body,
that's what I'm saying.
and
We have-
getting
we
an
have to do it.
update. Not on our own, but as a board, and
exactly.
getting up, good, critical, updated information, real-time information that would help us to communicate what's going on to
And
the
what I tell you,
citizens.
all these projects that they bring up, just on a note, and we'll move on, is they're not even in the city limits. Many of them haven't even asked for annexation to come into the city limits.
Correct.
So we're spending so much of our time and resources, the council and stuff, and yet we have partners who haven't even asked to be part of the process to come into our city. So I think we need good faith on our developers to say, hey, I'm committed to Selma, and start that process as well. So, Councilwoman Guerrero, you had a list, so you have anything else on your list? I mean, Mayor Pro Tem?
No, yeah, those were my three.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
So I wanted to talk about our capital improvement plan proposal, which I think is good. I think planning for capital improvement is the only way to guarantee that it eventually gets done. Wishing that it, or hoping or knowing that we need it.
What page?
What page? It's the last item on the binder, the last tab, right there.
Oh, page 96?
So, I don't really have a question on the items here. I have my just general thought is, are we doing anything to create an account where we can put in at a future date, or a fund to start paying for these projects, or have a, rather than saying, Public Work has a project, so we're taking it out of their account, and then, Parks has it, so we're taking it out, or are we creating an actual capital improvement account? Do we have one?
So my objection for this coming fiscal is to have that conversation as a fiscal policy. When it comes to setting up those funds and being able to allocate money to those funds, you have to create a policy. It's good practice to create a policy to be able to have that money set aside in a way. So this fiscal year, we focus on pension obligations. I think next fiscal year, what we're really going to focus on is capital improvements and equipment funding to be able to do that and create that policy to be able to set that money aside through the budget policy practice that we just did, again, like the $300,000 that we're setting for this aside this year. What does that number look like? What are we comfortable setting aside within the general fund? Because the general fund does have that unrestricted allocation that we can do, where other funds per se may not be able to do that. So it's having that conversation and creating those policies, because that policy creates that rubric to be able to set that money aside and do that. Creating that mechanism to make it restricted now. We've done that allocation, make it earmarked for not just one project per se, but the project list as a whole. Because if you don't have that policy and procedure in place, these projects will never transpire. So we need to be able to have that policy. So we focused in this fiscal year, one, creating a capital improvement plan. That was very key for us to start at that point. Our next policy in practice now is how do we come to fruition with those projects? So that you'll see that conversation starting to happen in this coming fiscal year.
What would the mechanism be? I mean, what are you talking about in terms of
That's
policy?
part of the, for again, budget, general fund, having a policy and procedure to set aside maybe $100,000 to allocate into an equipment fund, or maybe it's $200,000. Those are all direct impacts into the general fund, or looking at a financing mechanism, maybe another tax allocation GO bond.
Some of these items are would be funded through
Grant
grants
funding
as
is
well.
always something that we look at throughout the year. All these projects are part of our plan that we can identify as a grant, our funding mechanism for grants, or maybe a state appropriation. Those are things we do in general already, right? When we're looking for grants, that's why we have a grant writer that's full-time basis, because we have a project list, we have a white list for those organizations to utilize as a rubric to go after funding sources. So those are definites that we're doing now,
Is
right?
there going to be money to actually set aside to save up for the CIP this year, or is that something you're looking at in fiscal year 2021? Is there gonna be money
2021 more,
left
as
over?
you can see, as a restricted budget as in now. I think it's more of a setting that policy within our next fiscal and creating it within the next budget. So we can definitely have that conversation now, but again, then now you're shifting around. When you have most cities that are going into a deficit and looking at how do we cut? We have a balanced budget. It's really difficult to say, okay, well, we want to set aside this dollar amount now. Okay, well, now you got to shift that money away from somewhere else, and now you have another conversation. Okay, you want to shift. Council can have that conversation. We could have that conversation, but then we start saying, okay, well, how do we shift that money around again?
Because the way we did it with the pension was, any amount that we had over, what we spent would go towards the pension. It doesn't look like we're going to be in that situation this year, but in the future, hopefully we'll get back to that next year or the year after.
Correct.
We
then-
can have a policy
And those
for that.
policies can work hand in hand. Maybe we're just setting aside 50% for the unfunded liability or the pension obligation, and another 50%, that other 50% over and above our budget amount goes now to a capital improvement or equipment fund. So that's how we're going to create those rubrics, and we'll have those conversations.
I think that we should start working on our policy and procedures. The foundation of our CIP would be great. That would be the best move for us. That'd be really good.
Yeah, without those policies and procedures, you're creating wish lists, right? Policies and procedures create that format, that structure to move forward. So I think it's really key that we start addressing
We'll be
that.
guided by that.
So,
We can
yeah.
use that.
So now that we have a plan in place, now you talk about funding. Funding is really going to be key. And so part of the conversations we'll have.
So that was just my general comment on that, not that I have any comments on any plan.
Or any project per se,
Yeah, yeah, any project per se. But I did, on that note though, I did a couple weeks ago ask our public works director for a tour. And it was one of those tours where I said, just show me some of the things that are pressing within our city that, it may seem like a little thing, but, 10 little things add up to one big thing.
Mm-hmm.
So then I asked them, just give me a list of things that, that you could address that aren't really on the community's radar, or, that it really stands out. And so he sent me this list, and council, we have a copy of it. How do, for him and the Public Works Department and other departments, is that policy is something to say, hey, if say we find a grant that needs matching funds for something like this, or we have extra money in there and it could actually pay for this, that, hey, maybe it's not part of the capital improvement plan, but it does qualify, or does everything have to be added, his list has to be added to the capital improvement plan?
Not necessarily. So we use a benchmark of about, for a project, about $50,000, right?
Yeah.
So I have his list in front of me. I'm looking for some of it. Like just the very first one, storage building and paving the yard. That's on the capital improvement plan, right? All the big ones that is being mentioned within this top 10 priority are on that capital improvement plan. Some of the smaller ones, like the art circuit and things of those natures, those are being addressed now. Those are priorities and chain contest that we're actually looking at one of those now to fund through our streets funding sources. So yes, these are our priorities, but we're addressing some of them now because they are within that range where we can assess them. So yes, there are a priority list that he's assessing, but we're working on them now. Right? Downtown is being assessed. We've already started working on assessing what that looks like and trying to assess. The first step was we got the grant to get some of those trees to address those. Now Public Works is assessing what it looks like are we phasing that project? And you're seeing that too within the capital improvement plan, where we're looking at more of a 5-year projected, because it is very costly to assess downtown in one lump sum. Because what happens is when you pull that tree out, you're going to damage all that sidewalk. But it's not just the tree wells, right? You're addressing the tripping hazards and things of that nature. So those are capital improvements. Yes, they're on the list, but we're looking at street funding to actually assist with that project and moving forward as well. So the major ones that he has on there that are big dollars that we put into our capital improvement plan, I don't want to say smaller ones, but some of the line items like the art circuits we're addressing now.
Okay. Well, I mean, and this is very generalist, and that's what I asked for. I didn't ask for detail.
Yeah.
But when you say street repaving and repairs, right? I mean, if you look at our streets in our town, I doubt that we're going to address under the circumstances, even not under circumstances, I doubt if we're going to address every street that really needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
So I just think we need to be mindful that even though, because we're talking about not just after this financial crisis and this health crisis, but we're talking moving forward, hopefully, for many decades, that we have the mindset that yes, we need to focus on the big things, but we also need to make sure that we stay on top of the little things as well. And I know easier said than done. I know we're understaffed, but we have to have that mindset as we move forward.
Yeah, and that's why we have the streets fund per se. We're actually pulling money in from Measure C and other items to be able to do our annual maintenance and upkeep. That's why you have staffing in there that we're allocating directly to do that maintenance and things of that nature. Yes, we are restricted as far as our staffing levels and how much we can accomplish. That's why, again, one of his top 10 items were staffing and things of that nature. So we're trying to look long term to be able to assess with that.
Yeah, I mean, and I know that, and it's a slow process. I mean, when was SB1 passed?
Shoot, I think we're having the conversation 2 years ago.
2 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And we were gonna do Nebraska with it, right?
Yeah, they
And we
projected
haven't
all
yet
this
done
money.
Nebraska.
Yeah, they projected a lot of money to come out of that fund. They thought we were going to have like $500,000 within the first year. I think we're now at 600. So I mean, that funding source that we thought was going to create a lot of money out of the short term really projected out to be
Right.
a lot. And we are working on that project and projecting it
So
to come
what
in.
I'm getting at is, even though we have these SB ones and we get our COG money and our CDBG money, that's great, and we want that, and we want to use that. But at the same time, if we just rely on that, we're not going to be able to keep up. So if we can find on the years we have some extra dollars here, let's go fix that intersection. Let's go fix that park equipment, right? Let's just not rely on, oh, we have CDBG money to do that. Well, yeah, we do, but guess what? This year we have extra funds, so let's get ahead of the game. I think we need a mindset like that.
And I actually think you're going to see that coming in the next fiscal year too as well, because you do have some reserves like the LTF fund that has a reserve bank now that we can put together a project, not a good sized project too. So we're not just looking at grant funds to create street projects. We have those funding mechanisms now, those monies that are coming in now. And what the beginning part was the CIP, but it was actually the payment management plan. The payment management plan now identifies that we have a list that we can go from, because it's nice to address this neighborhood, that neighborhood, this street, this street. Well, you need an assessment. What is that pavement number? What to assign? Okay, we all know this is a bad street, right? But we also know that, let's say just Floral as an example. We
They
know it's a horrible
prioritize it
street,
for us.
but now we have a priority source that we can create and go from. Because if not, what you're doing is you're jumping all over the place, right? Without that rubric that we now have, which is the payment management plan, and engineering actually updating that plan on an annual basis to create that format to move forward, now we can address that and move forward. So I think we are looking at that now and doing that now.
When did we implement that? Because I know that was,
The payment management plan, with 2019, it was actually, it was created in 2019,
yeah,
yeah.
because I remember after
year ago.
SB 1 was passed,
That's when they brought it to
they
COG.
said we needed a pavement management or assessment plan.
Correct.
And stuff like that. And
Yeah,
just,
and that opened up that SB1 funds for different grant mechanisms
Don't
because we
have
had
to pay
that
for it
plan.
for the next 3 years? They paid for the first
They
year.
paid for the initial study and getting it started. We now have to pay for the software, and engineering has to maintain that system. So yeah, and it is budgeted to do so. So we've laid that groundwork to be able to make that mechanism so that we can move forward. So again, we do have funding sources at this time and reserves to create projects. We have been focusing, I don't want to say focusing on grants. That's not really what we're doing. We're always going after grants to get those projects done, but it's not our sole source of being able to do things. We have to wait for these reserves to build up, because like you can see for Floral Avenue, we're doing the second phase. That project's at 1.1 million. There's a lot of maintenance stuff that can be done annually, but those big projects do take those reserves to be able to build up and go forward.
Isaac, remind me again, do we have a start date on Nebraska?
Well, so we just finished the environmental, what we call I think the E76 is the term of it. We're using some federal funding to be able to commingle, not just that SB1. The NEPA, thank you. We're looking at now July because of the federal funding we're using to put it out to bid and get it finished off. So we were shooting for June. Because of the federal mechanism we're doing, it's actually being pushed out a little bit. But the good thing about that is we're actually being able to put in a sewer line under that format. We're not tapping into the system per se. We're leaving it, capping it, so that if somebody does want to utilize it, it is there. Our fear for that project, we're trying to say developer driven. We know that that's not that we can't just say that anymore. That street is in such dire need that we want to move that project forward. So we are doing the project, but we actually shifted it around to be able to use a different funding source, because now we can lay that pipe through that funding source. Again, it's going to be a cap pipe. It's not going to be in use yet, but now we don't have to dig up that street at a later date.
Good.
Isaac, your point made, because you don't want to go back, if you put the road in, you don't want to go put the sewer line or water line back in. That's double working yourself. I get it.
So-
Yeah, on that Nebraska project. Oh, well, I call it
Yeah.
project
So
there.
there's definitely a conversation to be had as far as you don't want developer driven to dictate safety, but you have to have that fine line where you go too far out and it needs to be addressed. So You don't want to dig up streets at a later date, but at the same time, you have to coordinate all this stuff as well.
So when we started, the city manager said, City Manager Gallivan said, my operating principle this year is we don't want to go into the reserves. Let me ask you the opposite question. When would you go into the reserves? What conditions would have to be present for you to consider tapping the $3 million reserve the city had?
I think the policies do dictate that, but I think typically it is an emergency. There are no other resources, and this is a critical gap that will get us something that we're doing at a critical gap. There's no other resources. And typically it is for something that is not something we have to sustain. So it's usually not staffing, it's a one-time.
It's not a continuing expense.
Right.
It's a one-time.
Cost. So those are usually the parameters to look at. And thankfully, we're not there today. We did all make, everybody knows we're making some challenging cuts, but thankfully, we're not in
I
a
think the fiscal
situation.
policy is 20%, but given the lower budget amount, we're actually going to be over 20% in the reserve fund this year. Is there any consideration given to taking some of that reserves out so we actually hit 20%? Or is the thinking to keep a little bit more in there in case the budget goes back up?
So our fiscal policies, it dictates that you use the number as far as your budget marker for this fiscal year. So that's what sets our 20%. But so when we go into next fiscal year and we have an adopted budget, our done number does change, you're correct. But we use that ebb and flow throughout that year to make sure that we reassess that number coming into next. This is where we're at. This is what it comes like. For example, we're budgeting revenues as a standpoint. We all know that COVID's still a factor, right? So we can't just dip in and out of the reserve and assume that it's all going to be okay. We need to project out and say, okay, what is that number going to look like in 6 months? So let's look at it now. We're starting to now come back. You've seen the stock market actually start to climb back up. We're not making jumps up, but for example, the Dow Jones is at 25,000 or more. We haven't seen that for months, right? So we're steadily watching that marker, but you have to keep a pulse on that. You can't just say run to the reserves for something that's transpiring. We all look good because a downturn could happen. Let's say COVID takes us back and we go into a spike where we go back down. What happens to the market goes back down. We don't want to think as worst case scenario, but we need to plan for worst case scenario as well. I'm sorry, does that answer your question?
It does. The reserve, it just still seems pretty arbitrary in terms of what the definition of an emergency is. It seems to be situational based. And what I'm hearing is we're not there. We don't have it. We don't have that. And that's good that we're not in that situation.
Correct. So the statement I made in the first budget meeting we had is you look to reserve as your last point, right? Make those hard choices, have those hard conversations to make those cut. I don't want to say operationally, but expenditure-wise, tighten your belt as much as possible. Clean up the overtime. Clean up your some of the project basis that their wish list and things of that nature. Focus hard on your expenditures. Look at staffing. Look how we can control expenditures now to be able to make those hard decisions now, so that when we move into reserves, if that is something that we need to have a conversation about, we feel confident as a team, as staff, and as council to say, look, we've looked at everything else. We need to go here now because our revenue stream is just not picking up the difference.
What are you hearing from CalPERS in terms of the discount rate? What's going on there?
The last time we heard was they were at 1%. So their benchmarking was 7, they're at 1. So,
Wow. Okay.
but that is a moving target. Like I said last time, they were looking at 3, and now they're at 1 again.
So they're one,
they're again.
So
I think
it's
they're
in flux.
positioning themselves fiscally to be stronger than they were last time. I will agree with the statements they are making. They are definitely making harder strides to make fiscal. Because right now, what you do is you benchmark yourself and to be able to come out of it stronger by buying those stocks lower and things of that nature. So I think they're doing a lot better than they have in the past. And taking strong positions now to be able to climb out of it faster. And a good position, our point at that is that they're at 1% instead of a negative.
But
where
we're
they were.
locked in right now for fiscal year 2021. We're locked in with our contribution to PERS.
Correct.
What we're really talking about is
We're
21,
talking more like
22.
22, 23 is where actually you feel that impact.
That's when we'll feel the impact
That's where you start
we're
getting that.
experiencing now.
Mhm.
Okay.
So we'll get the new reports coming into the next fiscal year, we'll start projecting out for those numbers. Because they'll have to incur that liability, obviously, until they can start spreading it out. Because we are in a pool plan as well.
How much do we have in that IRS account? Is it 115?
We haven't established it yet. The 115 plan is part of our fiscal policy to be established via the budget allocation that you're going to have for 300,000 this year. That is going to be your first time actually including that money, the contribution. Thank you. So your fiscal policy dictates anything over 20% will be allocated directly to
That's why I
the
was
unfunded
asking.
liability and or
That
the
20%
115.
is going to actually represent, a little lower, less money than is actually in there. Right now, I'm just wondering, is that excess going to go into the 115 then?
That excess with that
In excess of the 300,000?
So out of the fiscal year of 18-19, we projected, or we're not projected, but we came out with a surplus over that 20%. I want to say it was 1.3. That is actually, normally what we do as far as the fiscal policy is allocate that now, either toward the 115 trust or to the unfunded liability. It was my discussion with council is preferred to hold on to that and make that allocation in the next fiscal year. Again, coming back with the conversation, because PERS is at a 1%, there is going to be some losses. So they look at your asset pool. If you increase that asset pool, you either take on more of that gain or loss. And since they're taking a loss, you're going to take on more of that loss.
Yeah, you don't
So
want
it
that.
doesn't make sense to make
Hold
the
on to it.
allocation now. It makes more sense to be able to take it into the next fiscal. So we're going to hold true to our fiscal policy and make that allocation.
So we have the
And
115.
again, we'll have that conversation on what that looks like during the council meeting. And policy does dictate to we look to either or both, right? But it would be my suggestion to actually look at the unfunded liability because you are going to have that upcoming obligation or liability in those future years because you really want to control that payment. And the way you can do that is make that allocation next fiscal, and because it'll impact that obligation that you're going to have in those coming fiscal years.
We
So
can
you
use
have a
that amount
two-tier.
in that fund to offset that increased obligation that
Correct.
we may have in 22,
So you can,
23.
what you do is control that payment in the sense of the way you buy it
smooths our
down.
budget as
and
well.
kind of smooth it out. So yes, you're going to incur a liability as an increase in that coming fiscal year, but because you're trying to buy it down, you reduce that obligation as well. So you're kind of flattening it out in the sense of the way. It's not as smooth overall
But if we
because you're
paid
not
it ahead
pulling.
of time and their experience went down, then we would just lose that
Yeah,
money that we contributed.
because you're in a pool plan, you'd have a small marginal increase or decrease. But I prefer to do it when they're projecting a larger gain, or controlling that instead of a downtick that we already know is there, right? So coming into the next fiscal year, we look to them to do their investments and be as that benchmark that they project. But because they had COVID this year, that's something unforeseen, right? They are financial analysts. They look at the stock market and make those objective decisions. But you can't control something that's going to spike in the nature of COVID.
Yeah.
It's just something that occurs.
Thank you, Isaac.
You're welcome. So we kind of jumped to the capital improvement plan, which is fine. There are other funds. I just want to kind of open it up again and see if there's other departments that you'd like to look at. Again, I do want to talk about the ambulance fund just to kind of give it an overview of that department. But if there's anything else that you'd like to look at as far as internal services or enterprise funds, I'll just open it up now. If not, I'll go directly to the ambulance fund and just explain what's transpiring there.
Okay, I have a question I'm going to go into fire department. I know we talked about looking for lots. Did we get an update on that in regards to what happened with the parking lot? I know we talked about a parking lot, and then we talked about looking at lots. Did you ever find out or get an update or get anything on that?
Not as of yet. Unfortunately, it wasn't long after we gave that presentation to council that COVID hit,
Okay,
and we've kind of stepped back a little bit.
sure.
Yes, until we can kind of get through the pandemic and
Right.
start to look to advancing that project again.
Okay, okay. That was it.
Oh, okay. So, Isaac, you said you wanted to discuss something about the ambulance fund?
Yes, I just want to give you a quick overview of why the update is there, what we're looking at. Let me grab the page number. 71. So, thank you. So if we can all turn to page 71, that'll be the ambulance fund. Again, our initial projection for IGT coming from the consultants, or again, we're projecting a downturn, so we were conservative with that number at 3.6. We're now looking at 5.2, which is actually a decrease still from our current fiscal year. We received about 5.4. We're looking at a 5.2 now.
Page what?
71.
Oh, got it. Thank you.
Top portion.
So again, looking at an increase in the revenue stream because of IGT. I will say that I've made the calculation for the fiscal year payments that we received this year to make sure what is restricted and what is not. And it's looking like the full balance that we received is not having restricted to healthcare services at this time. Again, once we receive those funds, I do those calculations, so I'll update you as we go through and confirm. Next budget meeting, I'll confirm that number. I just did a rough calculation, but it does look like that we'll be fine. So we are seeing an uptick in our ambulance fund as far as our revenue stream because of the uptick in the IGT payments. What we have done to try and again address the situation is one of the key crucial items as far as an equipment standpoint. There's two-prong approach. One, we're looking at fire department as a whole. Two, we're looking at the ambulance fund with the understanding that things are coming into the future. They will be really close to coming to fruition as far as taking ambulance services over as a whole. The next item that we're looking at is the ladder truck for the fire department. They're in kind of a little bit dire need. And I think, Rob, I'll kind of turn it over to you and express why there's a factor. What we're looking at is you'll see a transfer out in addition to what normally come into the general fund, an additional $625,000, which you'll see in your transfer sheet on page 94. So one, we've added $175,000 into capital equipment. That is the purchase of an additional ambulance. As you're aware, we do have one now. It is a little difficult to run just one. That ambulance is eventually going to have to come into service. If you don't have a backup, you're going to have to lean on American Ambulance to assist with that, which is feasible. We are having that conversations now to make sure we do that. But since we have the increase in revenue stream, there was one item that we actually cut. There was a request from the chief, so we added that back in. And again, a transfer out of $165,000 that we'll be looking to put into the equipment fund to earmark just for that project this time. I'm sorry, $625. But I think, Chief, it'd be nice if he can speak to why we're looking to have that conversation now.
Yeah, so thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. It would be very difficult for me to express how much value I put into having a ladder truck as a resource for this community. I've personally been involved in several incidents with it, one within the past 3 years, where having that resource allowed us to rescue somebody that I don't think we would have been able to do without it, or would have had to wait, waited for somebody to come. This was just something as common as a tree trimmer. And the tree trimmer was up high in a palm tree and got pinned in as they were going through it. And fortunately, at that time, we had enough staffing that the truck was available. We were able to get it there and get it up and secure this person before they fell. I was there at that time. I got there first in the engine. It was right before I became the fire chief. And it was a very frustrating feeling waiting for that ladder truck to get there because we had no other way to get that high. So just for reasons like that, I put an extreme value in having that for the community. What we have done with our staffing, last year, council approved us a position. And we talked about the value of that position and having those resources on the fire ground. One of the other things that it allowed us to do is have enough personnel that we would typically run 2 engines with 3 people on it. What we did with having a consistency of 6 people on duty, we took those 3 people and we divided them up, 2 people with 3 apparatus. Mm-hmm. So we took 2 people and put them on each fire engine, and on 2 of our shifts, we have 7 people per shift. So in that instance, we plugged that person, that 7th person in where they're needed. But we also took then 2 people and staffed our specialty units i.e. the ladder truck and the brush truck. So the brush truck and the ladder truck are at the same location, and we call it cross-staffing. So depending on the type of call it is, that they take either the ladder truck or the brush truck if it's a brush fire. That all being said, unfortunately, our ladder truck, it is 25 years old. We're having extreme difficulties keeping it in service so that those personnel can operate out of it. Just this year, it was out of service for about 3.5 months. Just after I think it went out in mid-February because a part of the rear axle broke. And they were driving around in it. Fortunately, they had stopped, I think, to get fuel. And all of a sudden, they looked back at it, and it was kind of sitting like this. So it was out of service for about 3.5 months while they fixed that. This is a common problem, unfortunately, for us now. I have a sheet there that lists 10 items on it that need to be fixed. They're smaller items. Some of them are safety related. They're simple things like electronic issues that we just can't keep working anymore. The generator won't work, which affects our ability to light up a scene. So that being the case, and I have talked to the city mechanic, we've discussed it. He's really concerned if another major item breaks. The axle was kind of the first thing. We've had a lot of troubles with hydraulics, things like that. But the axle was the first really major structural component of the truck that broke. He's really concerned that if something else like that breaks, will it be worth even fixing?
Have you been tracking how much your expenditures the last 2 years on that truck is?
I have not. I would have to work with the city mechanic to determine, he keeps those records. I know that we spent, just on that axle, we spent, I believe it was about $15,000, which was fortunate. 30? 30 for both sides, that's right, I apologize. It was, because we decided because the one side broke, and it was 15 grand to fix one side, they actually went ahead and replaced the other side of the rear axle as well. Just figuring that if one broke, the other one probably would.
If you have a call, say that palm tree accident repeats itself and someone's stuck up there, and I've heard of people dying as a result of getting stuck in the trees. Is there something in our mutual aid agreement that allows you to call another agency and say, we need a ladder truck, we need it now?
There is, and that actually, we did call in for that very incident, but our closest one that is consistently staffed is out of South Fresno, Easton. So we're actually, between Fresno and Visalia, now that we have our staffing levels up, we're the only ladder truck in the region that is consistently staffed. Kingsburg has a truck, but it's not consistently staffed. Sanger just got a new truck. However, I don't believe they are consistently staffing it. In fact, they had a mechanical issue. It's not in service right now either.
How about Reedley?
Reedley has a truck. They're volunteer staffed, so it would depend on their ability to get somebody in to respond in it. In that incident that I shared with the tree, we did call in a second ladder truck. We used ours to get up to stabilize the person and hold him in place, and then we waited for the second truck from the Easton area. It was a county truck to get there to complete the rescue. It was probably 15 minutes, typically. So, I know that Sanger had a fire the other morning. They were requesting a ladder truck on a second alarm. I happened to be there assisting, and they couldn't get county's truck. Dispatch actually called me to see if it was okay if we sent ours. So their availability just depends on how busy they are. We had to call in Kingsburg on our fire on McCall a few weeks ago because our truck was out of service. Fortunately, Kingsburg had brought some staffing in, so that truck was available at the time, and we brought it over and used it, and it was beneficial in that roof had heavy fire damage and it had collapsed. Our concern was having to put somebody anywhere near it to reach the fire. Their truck has a bucket on it, which is what I'm looking to get on our next truck. We call it a bucket on the side. I'm sure you've seen them on TV. and it allows our personnel to get over a hazardous area like a roof that's collapsing and operate just above it without having to be on it. So.
Spray from on top of there.
Yeah.
How long does it take to get one of those?
That's the thing. If I had approval tomorrow to start the process, we would still be looking at about a year to manufacture it, to develop it, manufacture it, and get it out here. Our manufacturer that we use Smeal. That's who has developed our last two engines, and one of our goals has been to have a common developer, kind of standardize our units. So we have the same manufacturer develop them all, helps with mechanics and things like that. So we
So
would
am
go
I
through
hearing
them.
that the ambulance fund, the increase due to the lack of restriction on IGT funds will be enough to pay for a new ladder truck? in
No,
this budget cycle?
no, it's not. I mean, the project itself, and that's what we're going to come into more of a future conversation. We're transferring out and restricted into 625,000. The actual truck is going to cost between 1.3 and 1.5. So we're going to have a future conversation and potentially looking at Measure S to assist with its reserves, and how we can pick up that difference. But I think that comes back into having a conversation again with fiscal policy around equipment program.
Did
So I
you
think
put it
it's
in the
going to kind of bridge
CIP?
into that.
Is it in the CIP?
It is in the CIP. Yeah,
But
it
it's
is.
for next year?
It is in the CIP. It's for next year. If this is approved, we'll reallocate 625,000 into first year. But again, that's not going to take us all the way.
Could you, if we approve this, could you, knowing that you have a portion of it, could you already place the order?
That could be a potential. We'd have to figure out the rest. What I would suggest is saying that we could commingle these funds with other funds like the reserves for Measure S and make a larger payment and maybe potentially financing the rest so that we have it there.
Aren't we at
think that
zero
would be-
though for Measure S?
I think.
Not in the reserves.
How much do we have in the reserves?
I want to say 500 to 600.
I think financing would be the best.
Yeah.
That seems like an
Partially,
emergency, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
so
that's an
my-
emergency.
It
We're
really
talking
is,
about
yes.
tapping
Yeah,
the reserve.
I mean, we're not going to get all the way there. My objective and talking to staff is really to try and see if we can pull something together because it does, maybe he said this already, but it does affect the ISO rating as
Yeah, I'm
well.
sorry. Actually, I did leave that part out. It does have a pretty significant effect on our ISO rating. Our
We're at 3 right
fire operation, our operational capabilities is a 50% effect on ISO.
You mean our protection class?
That's-
Correct, yes.
Yeah, we
Which is
need,
3 right now,
Which is 3, right,
pending review.
with a truck. But if we did not have that capability within the 50% that ISO takes consideration to our operational capabilities, within that 50%, the truck would probably account for 20 to 25 with pump capacity, ladder capacity, and then the variation of what we can do operationally with it versus without it.
If we get a new truck, could that lower our
Or
PC to 2?
Potentially, we'll get a larger truck that can reach greater heights. I don't want to mislead council by saying yes if I don't know that for sure.
And that rating is going to not come into our assessment for maybe 2 years?
Yeah, 2 to 3
So, I mean.
would be our next due.
Yeah, so so we're good as far as now and current years potentially, but like he said, it takes a year to build the truck. So it is a conversation I think we need to have in the short term with city manager, the chief, and trying to see how do we pull this together so we can have a formal presentation to council.
Hey, Rob, since Kingsburg has one, I know they have one, but
Yeah, they don't have.
do they use them? I see them sitting there in the,
Kingsburg's is not staffed on a full-time basis, and in fact, I just got a call from their chief a couple days ago. Right after they helped us out on our fire, they had a major issue with theirs. It's going to be now out of service for the next couple months. They were actually able to, they were donated one from Fresno City Fire when they got new ones. We had that opportunity, but when we researched it and talked to their people, looked at our truck, we basically decided that we were going to probably run into the same types of problems. And now unfortunately, they have. And they got the good one. So Fresno had 2, I believe 3 available at the time. This has been a couple of years ago. And they got the good one. There were a couple of older ones with even more usage on them that we looked at, but, unfortunately, we felt like it wouldn't. And now they're running into the same types of problems that we're having.
So I'm sorry, you done? Are you done?
No, I'm done. Thanks, Rob. You answered that question for me. Thank you.
So that's another question, just to make sure we're pretty clear. There's usually sometimes with even our company, we have some leaseback buybacks. Is there any out there like that?
Potentially. I mean, that was one of the things the city mechanic and I discussed when we talked about fixing it, that if we did fix it, and hopefully we can keep it running over the next year while the new one's manufactured, that we would be able to get more in return when we did go to sell it than if we tried to do something with it the way it sat.
Are there any used options out there?
Yeah, leaseback buybacks.
We could do some research on that to see if there are.
I think a lot of what we've seen in the past is really just purchasing demo models.
Yeah.
Those have been viable options that we looked at and we've actually have done. So it all depends, again, how much can we cobble together to have the
Because they'd be
conversation.
ready, right? It'd be faster if you could get something that's already made.
Even the demo models still took some
Yeah.
time for them to prepare and prep.
They still calculate
Because
them.
you have a model per se, but does it fit the specs of what the city needs
Right.
and our city? So there is some internal modifications even to a demo model to be able to get you there. Correct me if I'm wrong.
We do have some specifics that we have to look at. We've been researching, like the ladder truck can only be a certain height. Because of our older stations, the bay doors aren't as big as they do make them now. So, the existing one that we have just does fit in and out, so we're looking at what they call a kind of a mid-stage mount, so the ladder hangs off the back and not the front. Just certain things like that we will have to take into consideration that will be very specific to the one that we purchase.
Yeah, so it's not just about purchasing the equipment as well as he's speaking to, it's also about logistics and where do you put it?
Yeah.
Because one size is just not a fit all. You can't just pull it into the bay and
That's-
call it good.
That's valid points, but in regards to, you came in a conversation in regards to commingling funds and saying that we could get a finance portion. Because of the time constraints, I think that's something serious, because having that ladder also brings in, we're talking about a hotel, they start, domino effects,
Correct.
People start coming and say, hey, we could build another one there, right? That's the way it goes, so.
Yeah.
I think we as a council need to look at it, or as staff need to think about, maybe bring it back to council about
In the short
different
term.
options, commingling, financing portion of it,
Yeah.
I think that would be a good option. I think those are good discussions.
An
So we
analysis
haven't-
of Measure S, like, should we be using that reserve? Does that meet the philosophy of using it on one time as opposed to continuing?
It actually does
That kind
for a
of thing.
reserve. I mean, one-time purchase, as the city manager pointed to, looking to a reserve to do, is best practice to do it instead of a continuous expense. So it is a good practice to do that. We have been having this conversation for some time now. One of the conversations, and I think we talked about it when it comes to a hotel and not having that restriction for a hotel to purchase that up front, using a TOT as your financing mechanism to be able to look for long term. So we've been having those conversations. As you can see, the ambulance fund has actually took on new revenue streams to be able to allow it to move forward, so we can have additional conversations.
You
on how
mean
that's
the other
funded.
half of the TOT, so the 6%, the half of the TOT goes to Arts Center, goes to parks.
Correct.
Infrastructure and parks operations. You're talking about the other 6%, right?
Correct.
It's discretionary. Okay.
But it'd be, taking it a step further, it'd be nice to set up some kind of policies and procedures for these types of costs, speaking in regards to the fire department, speaking in regards to the police department and public works. I know about 2 weeks ago, we were talking about a machine for the public works and in regards to blowouts, for a machine that costs, I don't know, what, 3, 4, 500,000?
Yeah.
I mean, but what positive would it create for our city? Positives.
Yeah.
So I think creating policies, creating a policy for this and creating it would be great.
Yeah,
Would be good.
and that goes along with the policy we discussed earlier. That's all going to be all encompassed in that conversation, I believe.
Yep, so it sounds like we'll bring back the policies, and we'll also bring back a proposal to get the ladder truck.
Thank you. With that, it is 12. Does council have any more questions so we could break? We can do a working lunch, or if there's any more questions or does staff have more to give us, we could end and have lunch.
I think that concludes my presentation. If there's any further conversations, we can go to work and lunch. The only note that I would, if you'd like to conclude, is if you are our satisfaction as far as what you see as the current proposed budget, that we look to adopt it in our next meeting. If not, potentially look at another workshop. So that'll be my final question to the council.
I think we should bring it back to the council to adopt it at the next meeting.
I think,
Very good.
I agree. I think we're fine with this. Jim, you have any questions? You're looking. You're good? Okay, with that, then we will adjourn for lunch. And I actually just adjourned the meeting.
Can I say something? I want to thank staff. You guys have done a really good job. I think from the 2 years that we've been, or twice we've done this, I mean, we're getting closer. We've as council have set policies and we're in the right track. I thank you guys for all the hard work.
Yeah, again, we'll continue to strive forward to create new policies and strengthen our budget book to look to the future.
And thank you for the balance. This is my 8th time around, and it's been balanced every single time, and I appreciate that. Really important to do that for the taxpayer and the citizens. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, staff. Again, I was really nervous coming into this.
So are
Let
we.
me tell you, only because my other colleagues have had way different conversations, and I'm
Yeah.
telling you, this is first class. And I thank you guys all for all your hard work, and believe me, I think we're just gonna, this is a great step, and we're gonna continue to move forward. And I think that we have set some good policies, and we're gonna see some improvements, definitely. And all we could do is keep moving forward.
Let's work on those updates.
Yeah.
Definitely, really important.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody. And with
Thank you.
that, have everybody have a safe but enjoyable lunch.
Thank you.